The first thing Ethan Cross noticed beneath the faded white blanket was a bruised hand, its wrist scarred by rough rope, and a heartbeat that refused to surrender. Dawn had barely touched the Arizona frontier, yet the desert already carried the heavy warmth of another unforgiving day. Ethan, a 48-year-old rancher, had spent years building a quiet life far beyond the reach of town gossip and other people's troubles. He believed peace could only survive where the world forgot your name. That morning proved he was wrong. A weathered wagon stood abandoned beside his north fence, one wheel buried deep in the dry earth. The old mule tied to the hitching post chewed lazily, as if it had waited there through the entire night. No driver remained. No fresh tracks pointed toward town. Only silence filled the air. A folded note rested beneath a length of rope on the tailgate. 2 words were written in dark ink: "Payment complete." Ethan frowned. He had ordered supplies the week before, but never anything that could explain this. Slowly, he pulled the blanket away. A young woman lay beneath it, weak and exhausted, her face marked by dust and fading bruises. Thick rope still circled her wrists. She opened frightened grey eyes and whispered words that struck him harder than any bullet. "You paid for me. Now finish it." Ethan's expression never changed. He cut the ropes with his pocket knife, careful not to hurt her already damaged skin. "I never bought you," he answered quietly, "and nobody owns another soul while I'm breathing." Tears gathered in her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. "Then please, don't send me back." Without another question, Ethan lifted her into his arms and carried her inside his lonely cabin. He placed water beside the bed and stepped away, giving her room instead of demands. When he returned to inspect the wagon, something caught his attention. Burned into the wooden tailgate was a strange cattle brand, shaped like a broken circle crossed by a single line. Ethan froze. He had seen that mark years earlier, on the night his wife disappeared without a trace. Someone had left more than a stranger at his ranch. They had delivered a warning. Ethan looked toward his cabin window, where the frightened woman watched him from inside. For the first time in years, he knew peace had ridden away from his ranch. If he walked away now, evil would win again. If he stayed, an old war was about to begin. Morning sunlight spilled across the ranch, but Ethan Cross felt no comfort from it. The strange brand burned into the wagon haunted his thoughts like an old ghost refusing to stay buried. Inside the cabin, the young woman had finally managed to drink a little water, though every sound outside still made her flinch. Ethan knocked softly before stepping into the room. "I'm Ethan," he said. "You don't have to tell me your story until you're ready." After several silent seconds, she answered with a trembling voice, "My name is Clara." It was the first honest thing she had spoken since arriving. Ethan nodded and placed a small plate of bread on the table before walking back outside. He searched every inch of the abandoned wagon until he discovered a loose floorboard hiding a folded receipt. It listed supplies that had never been delivered to his ranch, followed by one final line written in different handwriting: "Special transfer. Paid in full." No names, no explanation, only another copy of the same broken circle symbol. Ethan folded the paper into his pocket and saddled his horse. Before leaving, he looked at Clara. "Lock the door behind me. I'll return before sunset." She grabbed his sleeve. "If they see you asking questions, they'll come here." Ethan met her frightened eyes. "Then they'll find me waiting." He rode toward the nearest frontier town where the shipping office stood beside the railway depot. The elderly clerk recognized Ethan immediately, but became nervous the moment the receipt appeared on the counter. "Where did you get that?" the old man whispered. Ethan remained calm. "Someone left it at my ranch." The clerk looked toward the front window before speaking even lower. "Burn it. Forget you ever saw it." Ethan refused. "Tell me why." The old man's hands shook. "Because the Black Circle Company buys people, changes records, and makes them disappear. The law looks the other way because too many important men receive their share." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Who runs it?" The clerk hesitated before finally answering. "A businessman named Victor Kane." At that exact moment, two armed riders stopped outside the office. One of them slowly turned toward the window and smiled as though he already knew Ethan's name. The clerk's face lost all color. "They're here for the paper," he whispered. Ethan slipped the receipt inside his coat and quietly rested one hand near his revolver. He realized the fight had already found him, and there would be no peaceful road back to the ranch. The office door burst open before Ethan could draw his revolver. The two riders stepped inside with confident smiles, believing another frightened rancher would surrender without a fight. Instead, Ethan stood perfectly still. His eyes never left the taller man. "You're too late," Ethan said calmly. "Whatever you came for is already out of your reach." The bluff worked. Both men glanced at each other for a split second, and that was all Ethan needed. He shoved a heavy chair into the first rider, sending him crashing across the wooden floor. The second reached for his pistol, but Ethan struck his arm against the counter before the weapon cleared its holster. The old clerk quickly locked the front door while the struggle echoed through the tiny office. Within moments, both riders were tied with shipping rope, angry but defeated. One of them laughed through bloody lips. "You think this changes anything?" "Victor Kane owns half this town," Ethan answered. "Maybe, but he doesn't own the truth." The frightened clerk opened a hidden drawer beneath his desk and removed a dusty ledger. "I've kept this for years," he admitted. "Every illegal shipment, every false payment, every missing person. I was too afraid to speak." Ethan carefully took the book. It contained names, dates, signatures, and proof that the Black Circle Company had destroyed countless innocent lives. Before sunset, Ethan returned to the ranch where Clara waited on the porch, fearing the worst. When she saw him alive, tears filled her eyes for the first time. Ethan handed her the ledger. "Your freedom isn't based on anyone's permission anymore. It's protected by the truth." The next morning they rode together to the federal marshal's office instead of the local sheriff. The evidence was impossible to deny. Within days, Victor Kane and his partners were arrested, while families finally learned what had happened to their missing loved ones. Clara was officially declared free, with no false debt hanging over her life. Weeks later, she stood beside Ethan outside the ranch as the desert wind carried away the last traces of fear. "You saved me," she whispered. Ethan smiled gently. "No. You found the courage to save yourself. I only opened the gate." Together they watched the sunset spread across the Arizona sky, knowing the ranch was no longer a lonely place. It had become the beginning of a new life built on trust, hope, and freedom. Thank you for riding with Western Storyverse. If you enjoyed this original Wild West adventure, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next unforgettable journey across the frontier.